So this was one of my outlets. So I worked in the funeral home by day, but on nights and weekends, I juggled.
Eric is an educator, technologist,
and the host of the Education Innovators Podcast with over 30 years of experience in technology and education.
He has spent 11 years at Disney
and 6 years at Electronic Arts.
Yeah, so I kind of lived my life, a lot of my life, with this sense of urgency to gather those experiences, go and do, because I don't know, right? I just don't know when I'm going to have another day or another breath. And so I remember going to my dad and saying, why is this cabinet full of children's funerals records in the basement? And he got quiet and he said, because I've never charged a family for a child's funeral.
Someone once said to me, aim for the moon, and even if I don't make it, I might end up amongst the stars. 4.5 years ago, I got stuck. I made it my mission to spread positivity and help 1 million people to think differently. If you also believe that our world needs more positive energy, please join us on the journey. I'm Aaron Pang, and this is a Transformative Purpose.
Welcome. I want to kick off our conversation with a quote that you inspired me the other day. You haven't lost until you stop trying. What do you mean by that?
Well, I think I was actually kind of inspired by the Olympics. We've been watching the Olympics. It's very exciting. And I think you see those athletes who, well, I just love the moments anyway there, right? You get these people who have spent years practicing and working out and exercising and developing skills in the hopes, right? They're going to go to the Olympics and try to win a medal. And so many inspiring moments of both defeat and, winning. But I really found that I thought sometimes you see these folks just trying so hard and they're not going to win, right? They're not going to get there. They're not going to be on the podium, but they don't give up. Right? They just go, no, I'm here. I'm experiencing the Olympics. I'm doing this. This has been my dream. And I am going to fight till the last breath, as they say. And to me, this is really what life is about, right? You can't give up, right? If you stop, right? When you stop trying, then you really have lost. And so, you have to pursue your dream. You just have to keep going. And I think that, have I always done this in my life? No. Are there times when I've looked back and gone, I should have gone another round. I should have not given up. I should have, held on a little longer. There's also been times in my life when I've realized I went too long at something. And I should have recognized that, failure was imminent and don't waste too much time, right? Another one of my favorite quotes, I think I've mentioned this one to you before, is fail fast, fail cheap. So it sounds contradictory, but to me, that kind of failure it's not giving up. It's accepting that what I'm doing right now doesn't work. So let me put my energy into something else that, may work. So
how does one fail fast and fail cheap? What does that look like?
It's about very quickly putting something out there and just saying, okay, we're going to go. And I learned this in the context of the video game industry, right? So this was developers working on game code. And so you'd have this idea maybe for a new feature. And the goal was, as quickly as possible, prototype that thing, see if it's possible, and then see if it's fun, right? But don't get emotionally attached to it, because if we go as quickly as we can to a point of decision, and then we decide either we're going forward or we're not, right? So fail fast, fail cheap means don't invest a lot, invest just enough to know whether it's going to work, and then make a decision, right? And so I think this is a skill in life, right? You got to know when to make those decisions, right? You got to have that kind of go, no go. And I actually learned to kind of do that for myself too, along the way. And, there's just times where you have to kind of set a deadline for yourself Say, I'm going to try this for this long. I'm going to give myself 3 months. I'm going to give myself whatever. And then you got to commit to it and say, okay, I got to make a decision now.
Yeah. And that becomes a rational decision, right? We're not driven by emotion.
Right.
Exactly. We could be embarking on something new. And it's like human nature. Whenever we embark on something new, there's this level of anxiety. And then it becomes more of an emotional journey.
Yeah.
So as you know already, so I left my corporate job about 6 months ago. It's not my first time being an entrepreneur. But this time around, I've had a lot more peace with uncertainty and with the inability to predict what's going to happen 3 months, 6 months, 9 months down the track. And I realized I did something differently this time. I had a very clear objective. I had a very clear idea of how long my runway is. So I actually know and I anticipated what's the worst that will come out of it is I run out of money and it doesn't work, but I already gave my best shot and I'm just gonna go find another job and go back to corporate. And what I've learned with this level of sort of just, I guess, lowering your expectation also helps with your resilience. Like you no longer get stressed about, your pipeline is running low, revenue are not coming through the door because you know exactly how long you have.
Yeah. I used to say to people this threw some people off at times, but I used to say, nobody dies if we fail at this, right? We're not doctors in an operating room. We're not military folks with their finger on a button that could blow lots of people up, right? Generally speaking, we're building software, we're building games or whatever. So relax. It's okay, right? Don't stress over it. Just make a decision, right? Do we go? Do we not go, right? It's nobody dies. Nobody gets hurt. It's business, right? You got to decide, when to go and when to not go. And I think that it's great that you have a plan, you have a runway, as you said. That's what you have to do. You got to kind of have that out there, but then you got to commit all in, right? You got to go, do everything you possibly can to be successful. And I can see you doing that.
Well, thank you. Yeah. Thank you for the encouragement. I once had a chat with a gentleman called Michael Crossland. And I remember him saying, because you touch on go all in, with your plan, fully committed. I remember during my chat with him, he mentioned that we should never have a plan B. Because when we have a plan B and a plan C and a plan D, we will never go all in with plan A. What do you think about that?
So I like to calculate risk. I'm quite calculating. I analyze things, and so yes, all in on plan A, but I like to be a step ahead, if you will, on my planning. So what doesn't happen is I don't fall off the cliff, right? I don't go tearing out there and then realize that I'm going to fail fast, right? But it's not cheap now because I didn't have a plan B. Right now, I'm left with nowhere. Right, I've just gone right off the cliff. Right, and I'm tumbling down, and I have no parachute. Right, so part of fail fast, fail cheap is knowing what happens if I fail. Right, where do I go from here?
Right, so it goes straight. Next? You go straight into plan B.
Yeah, yeah. But you've got criteria, if you will. Right, there's measures in place, because that's the other thing that you just have to do, right? It can't be completely subjective of how do I feel 3 months from now, right? It's got to be, there's got to be real data around that decision. And in fact, that plan A, really all it is to me is it's validating assumptions, right? I'm collecting data so I can make a good decision when it gets to that point where I have to decide go, no go. Right. So all I'm trying to do is collect data. It's not about, how much money did I make necessarily. Money may be a factor, but there should be other data points in there that drive the decision. Now, in a business and life, and I got to pay bills, at some point money matters, but I hope in most cases it's not the single driving factor.
Yeah. Let's talk about how can one apply this calculation of risk in their life. So what sort of metrics does Eric look at whenever you want to do something new?
Well, I think that there's so many different things. So I'm doing a podcast now, right? And so the Education Innovators Podcast.
Yeah.
And I look at that as an investment of my time. And it's one of those where, for me, there was a couple of things. I couldn't go forward if I couldn't find guests, right? Because I knew I can't just talk on this show. People don't want to hear me necessarily talk about education and innovation. They want to hear experts and thought leaders. And so if I can't get those folks, then, turn off the mic, it's over, right? Just, quit. But, so that was one of my measures going in was, can I get good guests, right? And I knew that's a process, right? I wasn't going to get great guests on day one because who am I? And I got a podcast with no subscribers to start out with, right? I had no social media following. I was really starting from nothing. And so, that was another piece of it, right? Can I get some attention, right? Can I start to get some subscribers and I get people to download and listen to the episodes? So you have, there's a few metrics in there about the podcast itself. But then there was also, how much effort am I putting into this? Am I feeling fulfilled in doing it? So there is some subjectivity to that side of it where, I could be working so hard and it's taking away from family and other things. And sometimes you just make a call there and go, okay, well, this is good and I'm getting there, but at what cost to me in relationships? And so you have to weigh that, always, I think, is a factor.
You talked about not giving up and just got to stop trying. Have you ever thought about giving up when you were younger?
Oh, well, yeah. So I have had some experiences in my life of depression and failure and yes, giving up. And, you work through, I was lucky. I, had great family around me and friends and, and help through dark times. So yeah, giving up is an experience I have had. And I don't want to go back there again. So, yeah.
I remember when we just chatted last week, you have quite an interesting upbringing. I wonder if we can go there.
Sure.
Yeah, I think we do share a level of similarity in terms of how we grew up. I mean, we look different. But I felt like there were a lot of family dynamics in our upbringing which shape our belief system when we were young. And there was also a stage where you were navigating and you didn't quite know what that meant. Yeah, I was wondering if we wind the clock and go there.
Well, as a young man, I was confused. There's no question about it, right? There were forces pulling at me that I didn't know how to deal with. In my case, I have two older brothers. We're very close in age, so all three of us in high school at the same time. And this was really problematic for me because both of my brothers were exceptional students. And I was much more kind of playful and distracted, ADD, whatever you want to call it. I was not a great student. But every teacher I had pretty much would look at me and go, oh, you're a Byron boy. We have high expectations of you. And I'd go, oh, here we go again. I'm never going to live up to these expectations. And they're going to be disappointed. And, everybody's just going to be disappointed because I can't perform like my brothers perform academically. It's just not in me. It's not who I am. And so, so I kind of lived with that shadow of feeling like I'm just disappointing. And it really came to a head when we had to decide what colleges to apply to. And I announced, I'm not. I don't want to go to college. Right. And this was just like, what do you mean? Our whole life has been toward, this was just an assumption that everybody made. It wasn't even an assumption. It was just a fact, right? You came out of high school, you went to college. And I said, no, I'm not going to do that. And I took a year off after high school. I worked as a laborer, basically, in landscaping. I loved gardening and outdoor stuff, something I got from my mother, who was wonderful, with the gardens and stuff. And so, yeah, I did landscaping for about a year and realized that what I didn't want to do was be a laborer. I worked with these guys. I loved the guys I worked with, but even the owners of the company were looking at me like, all right, you're smart. You can do whatever you want. Why are you mowing lawns and digging ditches and stuff you should be doing more. So I did go to college, but I went to college on my terms, and I went and got a degree in horticulture. I studied landscape technology, an associate degree, and then ended up not really doing that. I ended up going to work for my father in the funeral home. So, yeah, my dad was a funeral director, and I represented the fourth generation. So my brothers didn't want the business. They didn't want to go into the family business. They had other interests. And so, it kind of fell to me, right? It was like, okay, well, I'm, looking around. Who else is going to take it, right? And this is, such an opportunity. I absolutely adore my dad, just tremendous love and respect for him as a person and as a businessman. What he was doing there was, I just said, all right, somebody's got to do this. I can do this. And so I went into the family business, got another degree, mortuary science this time. Yeah, really. And then came back, got licensed as an embalmer, licensed as a funeral director, and was working for my dad.
What was it like working in a funeral home? Was it depressing?
Good and bad. I will say it was tough as a young man. I was, 22, 23 years old, and this is not really good for dating. Well, two factors. One, you can't control when people are going to die, and when they die, they call you and say, "Oh, somebody's died," and you can't say, "Oh yeah, I'll get to that later." You drop everything and you go. And so when you're dating or you're trying to make, plans socially with your friends, and it's Friday night and everybody wants to go out, and then, 10 minutes before you're supposed to leave, you get a call and you got to call your friends and go, "Oh, sorry, somebody died. I got to go deal with this," right? Or worse, you're on a date, right? And now you got to explain to somebody why, "Oh yeah, no, I can't do that tomorrow or the next day because I work in a funeral home and we got to do the stuff." And yeah, women weren't real thrilled with, "Oh, you work with dead bodies?" So it was tough from that regard. I did love the service though, right? There was this compassion that happened there. These were families in, really hurting. Many of these were folks that needed somebody who just cared and was compassionate and was there for them. And so I loved that part of it. I felt like I was serving a purpose for people, who needed it. Yeah.
So you mentioned you were in high school. There was a lot of expectation because you had the same surname and you were living in the shadow of your two older brothers. How's your relationship with them? Well, how was your relationship with them then, and how's your relationship with them now?
Well, obviously it's much better now. We went through a period of years after they went off to college and they started their lives, and then I went off and did my thing, where we weren't very close for a bunch of years. We did the obligatory holiday, calls or get together and stuff, but it wasn't like we were going to hang out together. Very, very different lives and lifestyles and interests. One of my brothers is a monk, and the other brother is a lifelong scientist, absolutely brilliant.
There's
Off the charts.
There's a hell of a lot of expectation gap to fill.
So, but yeah, interestingly, my brothers ended up very close. So obviously the monk didn't get married. The other brother didn't get married either. And so he, another passion we learned from my parents, we all like to travel. And so my brothers would travel together. So they've traveled all over the world and done some very, very cool trips. And I've been on one with them that was interesting, a little bit of a outsider feel to it. But it was great to be invited and to go along, with them. One of the other things we've talked about, right? Life is a set of experiences. And, that was definitely an experience. We went to Peru, climbed Machu Picchu and, saw the ancient ruins and stuff. It was just an amazing trip.
And I can relate to that because I also grew up I grew up in the shadow of 4 other half brothers and half sisters, and I'm calling them half brothers and half sisters now. But in the past, I didn't know what to call them. I only knew that they belong to the first family. We are part of the second family. We try to turn a blind eye on each other. The only time that I recall ever seeing them from my distant memory was at my grandfather's funeral or at someone's wedding, and even then we would just walk past next to each other, wouldn't have any eye contact. And I was just intrigued, having to, I guess you at the time consider intelligent and successful brothers, and you didn't want to walk their path, so to speak, but you still had that courage to say, you know what, college is not for me. I'm just going to take a year off and just go do the thing that I love to find my direction.
Yeah, I don't know that it was courage. It was more like rebellion, honestly. I was a rebellious kid. If somebody said, you got to go here, I went there. Yeah. That was just kind of the nature of it. But one of the other things, though, that I also learned from working in the funeral home that I think I now look back on, and I think this really did affect the decisions I made shortly thereafter. But, I saw death, and I saw how fragile life is. And I saw families who were, robbed of a child, or, just anybody who just died way before their time. And I remember one in particular was a young man who was out running and just dropped dead. He literally was out jogging, and this is kind of gross, but he had dirt in his eyes because he never even closed his eyes. He was dead when he hit the ground. And I remember walking into the morgue and seeing this young man there, and he looked like my brother. And I remember this was just gut-wrenching, and thinking, oh my God, this young athletic-looking guy just dropped dead. You just don't know. You just can't count on another day. And so, so I kind of lived a lot of my life, with this sense of urgency to gather those experiences, go and do, because I don't know, right? I just don't know when I'm going to have another day or another breath. You got to go. Yeah.
So I guess it gives you reminders to not take things granted. I also wanted to ask you, like, you have all these dead bodies before you, day in, day out. How do you process or internalize all these vivid images, visual, that are being presented to you? Like, how do you stay sane, being bombarded with so many dead bodies?
Yeah. So this will sound odd, I guess, but my father had this incredible sense of humor. So, and I think this was a diffusion mechanism, right? That we all, you had to be really serious when you had to be really serious. But when you weren't in that mode, you really kind of went the other way, right? And you were joyful and enjoying life and laughing and having fun and joking around. And so there was a sense of camaraderie, I think, amongst the staff there too, that you kind of had to do that for each other, right? You had to, lift that veil and not be morbid, right? And so, Yeah, there was some very interesting personalities on the staff there too. That was an experience in and of itself. The people who work in a funeral home.
I'm deeply intrigued. Like I said, how do you be compassionate and humorous at the same time?
Yeah, there's no real key to it, but again, that is another thing that my brothers and I all picked up on. And it's so funny after, those years when we didn't see each other very much, and then we started seeing each other more frequently, really after my mother died, I think was kind of a catalyst for us spending more time together and realizing, particularly with my middle brother, how many things are similar we go in a restaurant and we look at the menu, never talk about it, and we order exactly the same thing. Or we use the same phrases to describe something, or, we both point out the same detail in something. We realize, we're very different. He's this scientist and spent all his life in academia, and I've been off juggling in the circus and doing all these other weird things. And, but we still have very common tastes and kind of value system in a lot of ways.
Yeah. I think you preempted my next question.
Okay.
From funeral home, how did you end up in Disneyland, and how did you end up in a circus?
So this was one of my outlets. So I worked in the funeral home by day, but on nights and weekends, I juggled. And I would go perform. I did clowning and rode unicycle and, enjoyed being, around happiness and happy people. But one of the jobs that I had part-time was working in an amusement park. This was in New England, Riverside Amusement Park. And there was a company there that was putting on some of the shows, and they, saw me juggling in the park and approached me one day and said, "Hey, we're putting together this traveling circus show. It's going to launch out of Phoenix, Arizona, and travel all around the Southwest. And we'd like to offer you a spot in the show." So you can imagine.
How old were you?
I was 23, 24-ish. Yeah. And, I'm looking at this going, all right, I just really started to get my groove working at the funeral home. I'm now a licensed funeral director. My dad is so proud. He's taking me around and introducing me to the whole world as, the next in the generation, or next generation doing the funeral business thing. And, how could I break it to him that I want to run off and join the circus? But then I looked at it, and again, some of this I think came from I had seen people who didn't get a chance to live their life. And I said, I can't say no to this, right? This would be so much fun. This is an adventure I have to have. If I don't go do this, I'm going to regret it forever, right? It's one of these things you can't just assume you're ever going to get this opportunity again. So I still remember going into the funeral home and asking my dad to talk privately. And, we went to a small office on the third floor of the funeral home, and I sat him down and I told him about this offer. And I said, I gotta go do this. And he cried. He, this was hard, but, later in life, he did, sit me down and say, "You made the right call."
What did he cry? What did he cry?
I think he cried out of, two things. One is, I think he was afraid for me. I think here's this rebellious kid who was just hell as a child. I tortured my parents from the time I was born, until then. I think I had caused so much trouble for my parents. And so I think some of it was he looked at this and just went, "Oh, this troubled young man is now going to go off and make this horrible mistake, and I can't stop him. He's old enough to make this decision for himself." So I think he was, sad for me, but I think he was also sad for the fact that he had himself really gotten attached to this idea of having a son in the business with him and somebody to hand it over to. His father was 50 when he was born. So when he got out of college, his father was already in his 70s, and, that bond between father and son, I'm sure was very different. So, I think he really relished that idea of being able to kind of share this experience with me and teach me the ropes. And, we would have 20 or, 30 years working together, right, side by side doing this. And so I think there was a real sense of loss for him there. And I went anyway. I went and did
Didn't
what
make you
I
change your mind
needed to
a bit.
do. Yeah. It hurt. I mean, if I didn't cry on the spot, I think I held it together there, but I cried later.
Wow.
When
Was it the first time your dad ever cried in front of you?
maybe? I think so. Yeah.
My dad is also a tough man. I can only recall he cried once in front of me.
Yeah.
It was the only time that he showed vulnerability. Yeah.
Oh, no, my dad was a vulnerable guy. He was a sensitive man. And, one of the stories I tell about why I ended up deciding to go into the business. So I was exploring at one point. There was this basement area in the funeral home, and this was a creepy, it was like a big mansion, right? It was 3 stories above ground and like 2.5 below ground. It was Anyway, the below ground stuff was a little scary. But anyway, I was down there exploring one day and trying not to freak myself out looking for ghosts, right, in a funeral home. But I came upon a filing cabinet. It was this weird filing cabinet in the middle of the basement. And I opened it up, and inside were all of these files, the records of children's funerals. And so I remember going to my dad and saying, why is this cabinet full of children's funerals records in the basement? And he got quiet and he said, because I've never charged a family for a child's funeral. Wow. So that was just something he did. The families didn't know. They came in to make arrangements, in crisis mode with a child that's died. And he would just let them pick a casket, make the arrangements, never said anything about the bill. And then when it was done, he took the file and he put it in the basement and instructed the staff, don't send them the bill. But he didn't brag about it. He didn't say anything about it. I don't think the rest of the staff knew this was the arrangement. Probably the only one who knew was his clerical, who would normally send out the invoices and track them. She knew. So I was really struck at the time. I was just like, wow, this is a man of ethics and values and compassion. He's not here just running a business to make money. He cares. And, he feels the pain when somebody loses a child. Yeah. And anyway, so I was sold right there. I was like, okay, I don't really want to be in the funeral business, but I want to be with this man. I want to, I want to learn values from him. Yeah.
I mean, your dad sounds like a great man. Your characters really show when no one is watching.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
We can all say beautiful things, and as parents, I think we love doing that. We love dropping those life lessons. In front of our kids. But sometimes I also remind myself: am I living the talk? Am I eating my words?
Yeah.
Right? And a few years ago, I had this big moment of self-reflection that I found myself a hypocrite. Yeah. And one of my favorite quotes that I've written is, "There's one person worse than a liar, and that person is a hypocrite." Yeah. Sounds like you had a great dad. You have a great dad.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And he's still around.
I know.
He's 90 now.
Yeah.
And,
amazing.
Still sharp as a tack, and he still drives. He's amazing. He's had trouble walking.
Yeah.
But he's. I talk with him. I try to talk with him every week. He's in the U.S. East Coast time. It's hard from here, but yeah.
Have you seen any ghosts? You kind of touched on that, and I actually wanted to ask you, like, have you ever, just you alone in the funeral home, and you or any of the staff members or your dad, have you guys seen anything?
So, not in the funeral home, but I had an incident growing up. So my grandfather died, right? So I mentioned he was 50 years older than my dad. So he was well into his 80s when I was a young kid, and he passed away And he died at home, basically. He got up from the table at dinner time and dropped dead in the bathroom. My mother was a nurse. She actually managed to resuscitate him. They got him to the hospital. And then in classic Byron mode, he was telling the nurse a joke and didn't finish the punchline.
Oh, no.
Boom, he was gone. But that was
Wow.
bright. That was perfect, right?
Yeah.
He was 86 years old. He was telling a joke, and that was it.
Yeah.
Right. And so anyway, but one morning, we also lost a dog about the same period of time, and I can't remember what time of day it was. I just remember walking. We had upstairs bedrooms, and I came out of the bedroom, and I went to go down the stairs, and I swore my grandfather and the dog were at the top of the stairs. And I just lost it. I remember just having the screaming memes and trying to tell my parents that I had seen Grandpa and the dog as ghosts.
Right.
So anyway, I believed it. Did it really happen? Was I dreaming? I don't know, but I certainly believed it at the time.
Went into circus. You went into circus, went to Disneyland, and you worked there for, I think, 11 years.
I did. I ended up at Disney for 11 years. So that was another just example of, I guess, kind of who I am. So after the circus thing kind of failed, right? So my dad was right there. I was taking a significant risk flying across the country to go join this circus. Turns out they didn't really have a plan, and they went bankrupt almost immediately. I was kind of stuck out there. Still an experience. There's other stories I could tell, but we don't have time for all of that. But I came back to Massachusetts after that, managed to scrape together enough money, flew home, and it was cold. Oh, it was January, absolutely freezing. And I said, you know what? I just can't do this anymore. Cold weather, I couldn't really go back to the funeral home, although my dad certainly would have taken me. And I said, I'm going to put everything I can get in my car, and I'm driving to Walt Disney World. And I didn't have a job. I didn't have a place to live. I didn't know anybody there. I just went south, and I ended up 11 years at Walt Disney World. There was no plan B.
There was no plan B.
There was plan B. I'm just going south, and I will find my way. And I used that degree I had in horticulture. Actually, I got a job in landscaping to kind of hold me over while I tried to figure out how to get through auditions and get into entertainment at Disney.
How was your experience working at Walt Disney? Did you become a child again?
Oh, so much fun. Just an absolute blast. 100 stories there. 7 years in entertainment. I got to do incredible things, and I met stars, talked to Danny DeVito. He's shorter than me. So many great fun things in 7 years there, and then crossed over into IT, which was weird. I was almost 30 at that point, but discovered a latent technical talent we never knew I had, and kind of a right place at the right time to learn some technology and networking, computer networking. And so, yes, a new career kind of began at 30. I was also a new dad at that point. My son had just been born, and that was a weird period. My 30th birthday kind of happened a week after my son was born, and I was, say, in this transition period, and all of a sudden it was like, oh, I'm in my 30s now. When did that happen? How did that happen? But life is good.
Yeah, I remember one of my favorite quotes from Walt Disney. I think he once said, problem with the world is too many grown-ups have grown up.
Yeah.
Yeah, they forgot about how to be creative and innovative as a child again.
Yeah. I used to laugh when I made that transition from entertainment to IT. I said the one problem with that transition for me was I called hug deprivation. In entertainment, everybody hugged everybody, right? It was just, that's how you greeted people, right? There was no HR sexual harassment issue. You just hugged, everybody hugged everybody. And when you were out I worked with the characters, right? So, Mickey Mouse, I mean, he gets 1 million hugs a day, right? And I did costume work. I wasn't Mickey, but I did costume work. And it was this love fest. You went out there and, kids were just hugging you and kissing you and I love you, and so then I went to IT. Well, your IT guy doesn't get a lot of hugs, let me tell you. And if your IT guy hugs you, you are calling HR. So I went through hug deprivation during my transition to IT.
Yeah, I'm surprised you didn't start a new trend in IT.
I would have if I thought I could get away with it, but yes, it was frowned upon there.
Yeah. So just became a father, you're 30-year-old, and I know that you have been married to this woman for 38 years. That's incredible.
Yeah. I met her at Disney. So I was a chipmunk at the China Pavilion at Epcot. Chippendale in Chinese costumes out there, and she was here on a 1-year work visa.
Right.
So she grew up in Hong Kong, went to the PolyU, the Hong Kong Polytechnic University, got recruited to come over to Disney on a 1-year experience, work at the China Pavilion, cultural rep, thing they called it. And so anyway, the Chinese employees there would beat us up in the costumes. It was they would get so excited when they would see us, they would run out and they would bang on the heads and pull on the noses and pull on our tails and stuff. And so we had to do this kind of training for them. And so as part of that whole effort, we got invited to a autumn Harvest Moon Festival that was hosted by the China Pavilion. I got invited. So one of the first times they kind of saw me out of costume and I met Kitty and I just, that very first night, I fell in love. That was in, September, autumn moon. And I asked her to marry me in January.
Wow.
Yeah, it was fast. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That was a bold move.
Hey, you can't waste time. Urgency, right?
How did you know?
Life is happening. Let's go.
How did you know Kitty is the right one?
Oh, she was just so completely different than American girls I had met. And, she was innocent yet smart as a whip. And, she had, you just tell she had these incredible family values. And, she was just pure. Pure and innocent and sweet and generous and kind. And I just said, all right, I'm not going to find this anywhere else. How do I keep this one from going back to Hong Kong? And so that was also part of the urgency to get married was I knew her visa was going to expire and, we needed to get married. So that was actually kind of funny too, because when we finally decided we'd gotten an extension, I guess, of her visa, but that was going to run out. We had to get married. So I remember having my parents on the phone one day, and they were going to come down to Florida, and they were going to see me. And I said, "Well, bring a nice, set of clothes, and we'll get married while you're in town." My mom kind of, drops the phone. She's like, "What?" I said, "Yeah, we're going to get married while you're here." So. We got married in October 1986, and we are still married.
Wow.
Yeah.
So got married fast, 38 years into your marriage. So what's the secret here?
She is right. I am wrong. I joke, but to some degree, that is really it, is realizing that there's no point in fighting, right? That, and she literally is right 99% of the time, right? If we don't agree on something, she eventually proves me wrong. And so I learned to kind of roll with it and go, okay, I'm not sure why she's right all the time, but she is. And so the other thing, and she will tell anybody who asks, I have not been a great husband. I have been distracted a lot. I was very ambitious. I worked very, very hard. I commented to you, I think one day that I kind of feel like I missed the 90s, right? I was working 3 jobs. I went back and got a bachelor's degree and a master's degree, and I was still juggling on the side. I was teaching and working, and we had 2 kids.
But what I also love about what you said to me is that you also had this non-negotiable boundary where Saturday just family day.
Yeah,
I don't care who calls me. Saturday is just for my family.
Yeah. Well, that was something I had to figure out. I didn't figure it out right away, but I guess, towards the end of the 90s, I realized I could work, 100 hours a week and never see my kids, and my wife's probably going to divorce me. Or I can start prioritizing family time and, time with my kids. And so I established with all of my employers from that point forward, I don't work Saturdays. You can work me to death Monday through Friday. Sundays I'll do stuff, but Saturday is mine. And I spend that with my kids.
I've been dating the same woman for 20 years, and definitely not easy. I think staying in a relationship, there are many ups and downs in life. And I also feel like sometimes we fall in and out of love, depending on the season. Yeah.
Well, I've always said that people evolve over time, right? We all do. We evolve faster when we're young, which is why my advice for teenagers is don't get so attached, because in the next year you may change radically, she may change radically, and you may not be changing in the same interests, right? So fail fast, fail cheap there too, right? Know when to cut it loose, right?
Yeah.
But in a marriage, that's so much harder because now you've made this commitment, yet you are both still evolving, right? Life happens and things change, and sometimes people grow apart, and this is a natural thing. I don't think you can necessarily solve it, but with enough effort and common interests, caring and prioritizing each other, yes, you can last a long time. But there's still a little bit of that. You got to be on the same wavelength there.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I feel like there are a couple of things that are really important here when I think about relationship. One is that I think when you meet someone, you should really look beyond the surface. You should really be looking for that character alignment and value alignment, right? So no matter what you guys are fighting about, it always goes back to your why. Like why you guys got together. How do you want to raise your kids? And at the start of the conversation, you mentioned we are, watching the Olympics is happening, and I often associate marriage like team sport, right? In a team sport, right? You win as a team, and you also lose as a team, right? The moment one person becomes defensive or they take things personally or to try to attack you on a personal level, that's when things break, right? Because you no longer have. If you have kids, you're no longer having your kids as the best interest.
Yeah.
So I always go back to the crux of the issue. It's not about me versus Eric. It's not about Eric versus Aaron. It's about what is the issue at stake here.
Yeah.
And what are the solutions?
Yeah. One of the ways I learned that, just one of those phrases that stuck with me, but it was issue, not tissue, right? So tissue meaning I'm attacking the person, right? Your physical tissue, right? So yeah, issue, not tissue. So yes, when you have a disagreement with somebody, you discuss the issue. This is how your behavior affects me, right? Not you're a jerk for behaving this way, right? That's an attack on the person, but you have to say what the issue is. Because you did this, now we're going to lose money. Right? Yeah. Let's solve this. How do we solve this? Yeah. How do we solve this? Right? Not you screwed up. You go fix it.
That's right.
Right?
Yeah. Don't make the issue personal and don't make the issue pervasive into other parts of our life.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I know you're doing a lot of work with EdTech, and you've done gaming, you've done EdTech, you've also got into AI. want to ask you a question about education.
Okay.
Right? Should kids still go to schools?
Yes.
Okay.
So, but I think schooling needs to change. There's a lot of, I don't want to be negative too much. This is one of the things I try to do with the podcast too, is it's not about what are the problems, it's more about what are the solutions, what's the future, how do we evolve education. And I believe that that education needs to evolve from being a kind of in this box framework thing that says, oh, you're in year one and you learn this curriculum, and you're in year two and you learn this, and then you matriculate to whatever, in the high school and then to college or whatever. And then finally you're out of education, go work and make a living, right? I think that in the future, those boundaries have to go away. And we develop people, individual humans, right? And each one kind of progresses through levels of education based on not only their ability, but their interests and their strengths and their weaknesses, that it's much more personalized and at a pace that makes sense for them, not, oh, you're in year one, therefore you must do these things and know these things to go to year two. And that the transition to working is also a much more fuzzy kind of thing, right? At some point, you start working probably part-time while you're still in school, and then maybe at some point you're now working full-time, but you're still, educating, learning on a part-time basis, probably forever, right? That there's no clear delineation from you're a student in school to you're working,
Right.
in your career mode now.
Right. So it's being a lifelong learner, like you said.
Yeah.
There's a big movement in the U.S. at the moment around phone-free school. Movement started by Jonathan. I don't know if you've been following closely. How do you feel about infusing AI and, I guess, giving the next generation access to smartphones and to technology? Like, where is that boundary? Is there a boundary?
Well, to me, the key with AI is that we have to stop looking at it as AI does these things and I can hand these things off to AI and let AI do them for me, right? I think the real key and the kind of attitude that educators need to take around AI is that AI is an enabler, an enhancer. It's a tool I can leverage to actually help me learn something better, faster, not replace that ability or do something for me. It just helps me do it better, right? So whether that's reading comprehension and a AI tutor that kind of reads with you and asks you questions, right? Rhetorical questions, they call it Socratic questioning, right? Instead of answering a question, it asks you another question back, right? To kind of test your understanding of things. AI can do this. Math questions, same thing, right? I'm struggling and it asks me, what do you think is the next step, right? Why do you think you should do that, right? What if you did something else? What would you do, right? So, what's your plan B if plan A doesn't work, right? And so these AI tutors, I think, can really level the playing field because teachers don't have time to handhold like that, right? They just don't have the capacity to do it. And so they've got to kind of unburden themselves from this fear of the AI and let it do what it is good at. And it can help, right? Now, should I take my essay assignment and throw it in ChatGPT and have it write my paper for me? Absolutely not, because the whole point of that essay is for you to learn, for you to exercise your brain, to come up with your ideas and write them down, right? Create something, right, from it. Use your language to tell it and your ideas. AI doesn't have any ideas, right? It doesn't think, it doesn't create. It simply puts words together for you. But sometimes if you can't find the right words, AI can help you find the right words, right? It can help you tell it better than you would tell it yourself, but it's still your idea. It's your thought. It helps you express it better. And I think that's the distinction, right? It's not cheating. It's helping me with my idea, right? But you've got to slow down sometimes and say, okay, don't help me yet, right? Let me look at it. Let me come up with my idea, and then you can help me craft it. And I think that's where the usage, the ethical usage, we have to be careful of, is that you don't go quickly to AI and say, help me. Well, I used to, this is when I taught computer science classes, and you did labs. I was mean. I used to break the labs because I know you learn more when you run into a problem. But I also set a rule that said, when you do run into that problem, that I sabotaged the lab and made sure you're going to have problems, you can't ask me until you've spent at least 2 minutes trying to solve it yourself, right? And I think AI is like that, right? We got to say, oh, you got to spend at least 2 minutes trying to figure it out. Then you can ask the AI tutor for help.
Yeah.
But
I guess as technology becomes more and more mature, I guess the individuals really need to be mindful of how they, like you said, how they interact with the AI.
Yeah.
It's a tool that can empower us, not a tool to, I guess, replace the original thinking or to replace our basic ability to think logic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'm a huge proponent too on the education side that I think that our education systems actually constrain learning. I think there's a lot more really, really, really smart people in this world who don't ever get to shine because the system, they're constrained, right? Oh, you're going to learn what's in year one. And maybe you're brilliant and you could have been in year 3 curriculum in certain subjects by now, but no, unless you get flagged as an exceptional student, right? And then maybe you get some help and you can move up, but then you get that awkward thing of, oh, I moved forward a year, skipped a year, whatever. And now I'm with kids who, aren't my age, and there's that awkwardness. But that's why I think we need to break down those barriers and just say, move as you move, learn as you learn. If you're a late bloomer like me, I was terrible in math in high school. I was lucky I graduated from high school and then took a year off, finally went back to college. I ended up tutoring math in college. Go figure. I was a late bloomer. Yeah.
And this is going to be one of the applications of using AI, right? The ability to democratize and also to customize and personalize different learning plans. And like most people would say, that systems are built to scale. They're not built to help people customize or personalize the content depending on their learning needs or the individual learning styles. I want to ask you probably one of the last questions. You went through a lot of hoops. You went to funeral home. You saw a lot of dynamics and dead bodies. You went to circus, and then you went to Disneyland. You went into entertainment, and then you transitioned into IT, and now into edtech, and also podcasting. At what point did Eric discover his superpower? When was that, and how did you discover your purpose and your superpower?
When did I consciously believe it was something special for me? I think at some point along the way, when I first really started in leadership, 2 things came out that I realized that I do well that other people find it hard to do, which is to me kind of the definition of a superpower, right? Something comes easy to me, but it's hard for other people. One of those was calmness under fire, right? When I was IT operations and, it would hit the fan, right? Something was down, systems are down, people don't understand why. There's a virus outbreak and all hell's just breaking loose and people are running around screaming and carrying on. And I was the guy who...
You're the fireman.
Well, I was the guy who was the kind of sense of reason, who would just go, stop. I need data. Let's get the noise out of the room here and figure out what's really happening. What's really happening here? How do we solve this? And so that ability to be calm in crisis was like a superpower. I mean, people who worked with me learned that when it hits the fan, even if it's not Eric's area, pull him in to mediate, because he'll do a great job of just calming people down and getting them to talk and rationalize it out. What's really going on here? What do we know? What do we think? Right? If you think that's true, how do you go prove it's true? Right? And let's not jump to conclusions and knee jerk and make it worse by doing the wrong thing or reacting inappropriately to the crisis. So, and the other thing I learned later, right, was, and I say this all the time, it's always about people, right? I work in technology and I work in ed tech, but it's always about people. And I believed later that one of my superpowers was the ability to spot other people's superpowers. So I got people to do things they didn't think they could do by realizing, this is their talent, this is their strength. And, I've got to play to that. And when I play to that, they do incredible things. And we all benefit because I'm leveraging their strength. And they're happy because now they're doing something they're really good at. And yeah.
Right. And for the people who are listening to our conversation, what's the one question Eric wants to ask them? If there's one question you can ask the audience that is watching the episode right now, what question do you want to ask
them? Well, I didn't come prepared with a question. Question for the audience. So, have to cut some dead time out of this.
It could be a question that you like the audience to self-reflect. Or maybe one of your favorite questions that you like to use when you self-reflect. What would you throw it out today?
Yeah, well, I think we all have to look at, there's a constant kind of challenge to ourselves, right? Why, right? Don't do things just because, somebody else is doing it, or you think it's the right thing to do, or it's politically correct or whatever. I think we always have to keep challenging ourselves, right? What are our priorities? What's driving our decisions? And so I guess, yeah, that would be kind of my question to you. What really matters, right? How are you making decisions? And do you know what your priorities are?
Great. Thank you, Eric. Thank you so much for coming on to have a chat on the podcast.
Yeah, this was fun.
Yeah, likewise. Thank you so much, Eric.
All right.
Good to chat.
Thanks.